Hi guys. I just want to say how much I'm missing all of my Zig homeschool class kids. I always really looked forward to our Thursday classes, and I'm sad that we're not going to be able to get back together for a while. Just know that I'm thinking about you, and if you have any questions or any thoughts, I don't know, feel free to contact me through my email address. So one of the things that I'm going to do for our continued sing, read, write, and draw classes is continue to read Mr. Popper's Penguins. The kids were really enjoying this. We were doing a little unit study on this book and all the things that we could learn from it. And so I'm just going to read it one chapter at a time in the videos. We were reading 2 chapters a week per class, so I will release them in 2 chapters a week, but you can watch them however you want. So this week we are going to start off with chapter 9, Mr. Greenbaum. And I promise, kids, if there's a picture, I will turn it around and I will show you. And I'm going to read this exactly the way that I would in class. I might ask questions that I would ask in class. So parents, if you're there and I ask a question and they don't know the answer, you guys can help them figure it out. All right, chapter 9, Mr. Greenbaum. "Look here," said Mr. Popper at breakfast one morning. "It says here in the Morning Chronicle that Mr. Greenbaum, the owner of the Palace Theater, is in town. He's got a string of theaters all over the country, so I guess we better go down and see him." That evening, it was Saturday, the 29th of January, the Popper family and their 12 trained penguins, 2 of them carrying flags in their beaks, left the house to find the Palace Theater. The penguins were now so well trained that Mr. Popper decided it was not necessary to keep them on leashes. Indeed, they walked to the bus line very nicely in the following line of march: Mr. Popper, Captain Cook and Greta, Columbus and Victoria, Nelson and Jenny, Magellan and Adelina, Bill Popper and Janie Popper, Scott and Isabella, Ferdinand and Louisa. So that's how they walked to the park. And you know what's funny about most of the penguin names? Do you guys remember that Mr. Popper loves explorers? He loves people who go out to like the Arctic and all these places to find new things. He named all of the penguins, or most of them, after explorers or people who supported explorers. So we're going to talk a little bit about explorers in the weeks to come as well. The bus stopped at the corner, and before the astonished driver could protest, they had all climbed on, and the bus was on its way. "Do I pay half fare for the birds, or do they go free?" asked Mr. Popper. "Janie goes half fare, but I'm 10, said Bill. "Hush," said Mrs. Popper as she and the children found their seats. The penguins followed in an orderly fashion. "Say, mister," said the driver, "where do you think you're going with that exhibit?" "Downtown," said Mr. Popper. "Here, let's call it 50 cents and let it go at that." "To tell the truth, I lost count when they went past me," said the driver. "It's a trained penguin act," explained Mr. Popper. "Are they really birds?" asked the driver. "Oh, yes," said Mr. Popper. "I'm just taking them down to the palace to interview Mr. Greenbaum, the big theater owner." "Well, if I hear any complaints, off they go at the next corner," said the driver. "Fair enough," said Mr. Popper, who wanted to ask for transfers in that case, but decided to let well enough alone. The penguins were behaving very well. They were sitting quietly, 2 in a seat, while the other passengers looked on. "Sorry," said Mr. Popper, addressing everyone in the bus, "but I'll have to open all the windows. These are Antarctic penguins, and they're used to having it a lot colder than this." It took Mr. Popper quite a while to open the windows, which were stuck fast. When he had succeeded, there were plenty of remarks from the other passengers. Many of them began to complain to the driver, who told Mr. Popper to take his birds off the bus. He had to repeat this several times. Finally, he refused to take the bus any farther until Mr. Popper got off. By this time, however, the bus had got so far downtown that none of them minded having to get out into the street. Only a block ahead of them shone the lights of the Palace Theater. "Hello," said the theater manager as the Poppers and the penguins trooped past him. "Sure, Mr. Greenbaum's here in my office. You know I've heard about these birds of yours, but I didn't really believe it. Mr. Greenbaum, meet the Popper penguins. I'll be leaving you. I've got to go backstage." The penguins, now standing politely in 2 rows of 6, looked curiously at Mr. Greenbaum. Their 24 white-circled eyes were very solemn. "All of you people crowding around the door, go back where you belong," said Mr. Greenbaum. "This is a private conference." Then he got up to shut the door. The Poppers sat down while Mr. Greenbaum walked up and down the double row of penguins, looking them over. It looks like an act, he said. Oh, it's an act, all right, said Mr. Popper. It's Poppers Performing Penguins, first time on any stage, direct from the South Pole. He and Mr. Popper had thought up this name for the act. Couldn't we call them Popper's Pink-Toed Penguins? Asked Mr. Greenbaum. Mr. Popper thought for a moment. No, he said, I'm afraid we couldn't. That sounds too much like chorus girls or ballet dancers, and these birds are pretty serious. I don't think they'd like it. All right, said Mr. Greenbaum. Show me the act. There's music to it, said Janie. Mama plays the piano. Is that true, madam? Asked Mr. Greenbaum. Yes, sir, answered Mrs. Popper. Well, there's a piano behind you, said Mr. Greenbaum. You may begin, madam. I want to see this act. If it's any good, you people have come to the right place. I've got theaters from coast to coast. But first, let's see your penguins perform. Ready, madam? We better move the furniture first, said Bill. That's the end of that chapter. So I want you guys to notice something. Say this with me, or I'll say it and then you say it. Poppers Performing Penguins. I'm just imagining you guys saying that. All right, let's say it one more time. I'll say it, you say it. Poppers Performing Penguins. What letter do you guys hear at the beginning of that? Poppers Performing Penguins. And it's in our book too. Poppers Penguins. It's a P, right? Pa-pa-pa-pa-pa. The author is using something called alliteration to make it really fun to say. Alliteration is when a certain sound is repeated at the beginning of words in a whole phrase. So Poppers Performing Penguins, you have that pa-pa-pa all the way in there. And even what the manager wanted to call it, Poppers Pink-Toed Penguins. There's lots of P's. And that's called alliteration. It's just a fun thing. It makes it fun to say, and it makes it a little bit more artistic when you're trying to name something especially. So if you guys want to have some fun, see if you can name something in an alliterative way. So if you had a performing arts group, what would you call it? So like Josiah might say, Josiah's Jesting Jokers or something like that. Or Caleb, you might say Caleb's Cowering Kittens. I don't know. What alliteration can you guys come up with? What would you name a performing arts group? If you come up with something, I would love for you to take a video of you saying it with your fun alliteration of pa-pa-pa or ja-ja-ja and post it in the Facebook group so I can see it. All right, I miss you guys, and I hope that you're all doing super good.